Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going over my Draftkings and Fanduel Week 1 first look picks. I'll have a final look out probably Friday or Saturday, but we're less than a week away from main slate action. 13 games to get us started for this football season. Got some great contests across the board. It should be a fun one, so let's go ahead and get started. As always, if you enjoyed the videos, I appreciate it for the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already for videos all throughout the season. Cover other sports as well. You can check out Twitter for updates. It's at the DFS Process. You can check out the website if you need more assistance with your lineups, dfsprocess.net. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'll go through position by position, highlight the guys that really stick out to me based on each tier, and then I'll fill out like 6 spots here as a first look. Final look, I'll have some other guys in there as well. But starting off with the quarterback position, just looking at the Vegas totals for this week, it's the Chiefs have the highest total. It's a pretty tight bunch at the top. You have the Chiefs at 28 and a quarter or 3/4. We have the Chargers right behind them, 1 point less, almost 28 points. The Bills, that game's not on the main slate. We're going to be treated to that on Thursday. Then we have the Colts against the Texans. You have the Eagles, teams that you'd expect. So any of those, like any team that's over 23 plus implied totals, really, I have no problem with stacking. Probably 24 and up is really the top tier. Teams that are below that, you can get a couple of pieces from, maybe from tournaments that look better, but then the teams that have a below 20 point implied total, I'm really not going to focus on them too much, just because, especially if you're doing cash games, you don't really want to have any of these teams in there to a wide extent, although possibly the Bears. You're just some one-off picks, not teams that you want to stack. But going back to the quarterback position, the top tier guys above $7,000, I do think that I prefer running quarterbacks. So Lamar Jackson against the Jets, he looks probably one of my favorites out of that group. Same thing with Kyler Murray. He just got that huge extension. Gets a good matchup. It should be a high-scoring game against the Chiefs. So those two really stick out to me. They're not the most expensive. I like Herbert, but 76 is still second highest priced quarterback. We can get to a couple guys that give you upside with their legs below him. 7K flat. Aaron Rodgers, be interesting to see how he fares without Davante Adams, but probably throw to his tight end more. Probably throw to like A.J. Dillon more out of the backfield and Aaron Jones more, and probably they have drafted a couple of wide receivers. Their later round pick looks pretty solid. We have Jalen Hurts, probably going to be one of a lot of people's favorites in the mid range. He's 68, so he's not he's not part of the top 5 most expensive quarterbacks, but he is probably going to be projected to score top 5 points this week against the Lions with the upside and with the upgrades that they made on offense, bringing in his friend and guys that go back a long time, and A.J. Brown, and those guys have had some good connections in training camp. So I do like Jalen Hurts if you're looking at any quarterback above $6,500. Right at 6K, you have Trey Lance against the Bears. He's another quarterback that I really like, just with the rushing upside. The matchup is not terrible against the Bears. Look at the rankings; their secondary is ranked 30th, so two teams right behind them are the Giants and the Texans secondary. Even though he's more better with his legs, I think he'll take a step forward this year and still has 2 good weapons to throw the ball to, or even 3, counting the tight end. Below 6K, Derek Carr, with the upgrades that he got with Davante Adams, he should have a good year, although he doesn't give you upside with his legs. A guy that's in this range would be Justin Fields, even though he doesn't have an easy matchup against the 49ers. They're at home, and it could be a nice stack going with Fields and Donnel Moon for tournaments because they have the low total. I don't think people look that way, but you got to be different. You can't just do what everybody does if you want to win these tournaments. But I do like Winston a bit. He's $5,300. He's another quarterback that gives you upside with his legs, and he gets a good matchup against the Falcons, not only to get some yardage against them on the ground, get a couple carries, get some yards, possibly a rushing touchdown, but also do some damage, as they are going to be bottom 5 in secondary ranking so far heading into this season, and they didn't really make any major upgrades. They have Terrell, who's pretty solid, but otherwise they should look to target against the other 3 guys back there. So Winston, if you're looking for a cheap quarterback, that is definitely it. And then right at 5K, you also have Daniel Jones if you want to be sneaky. Because the Giants are a super cheap stack. You can get Jones at 5K, get to Saquon at 61, and get to, Robinson at 3K, especially if Shepard isn't able to play in week 1. Over at the running back position, I have no problem with any of these guys that are expensive. They all look good. If I had to rank the top four, I'd say I prefer some of the guys that give you more upside with the pass catching. So probably McCaffrey, followed by, or possibly Taylor, followed by McCaffrey, then Eckler, then Henry. Eckler coming off of a monster season with 20 touchdowns. They are going to be scoring a lot of points in week one. He's probably going to be looking at a good amount of receptions out of the backfield as well. So always concerned with him as is able to stay healthy, but that's best time to play him is early on in the season where he doesn't have any chance to be really banged up. You have Dalvin Cook at 79 right below them. He's probably going to get sleeped on a bit. So just because he has the red 9 next to his name, or the red 5 next to his name, and everybody above him has greens. But this is still based off of last year, and we can see things change. So for tournaments, I like Cook. Right at $7,100, you got Joe Mixon. I like him just with the value. Winston, he's probably not going to throw to Kamara as much as like we saw Breeze do and we saw Taysom Hill do. But don't mind Kamara, but I probably like Winston getting to one of the wide receiver stack. If I had to stack him, you don't even have to stack a guy like Winston just because he can get it done with his legs. But right in the 6K range, we also have some great cheap running backs, starting with Aaron Jones. He's going to play a major role. A lot of those touchdowns that were going to Devontae Adams possibly can go to Jones. It might have to run the ball more when they're inside the 10 or inside the 5 even, and he can even catch passes and catch touchdowns. We saw him close out with the 10-target game against the 49ers. Even though Dillon should have a pretty sizable role this year, could see them running more 2 running back sets, losing Devontae Adams and still getting their wide receivers up to speed. So like Aaron Jones at 67, and then you also have like Swift at 68. If you're stacking the Eagles, you can definitely bring it back with DeAndre Swift. He would be the one Lions player that I have the most confidence in. But we're getting Najee Harris at 64, another workhorse. Both guy just like Aaron Jones, who's going to command some targets out of the backfield and going to command goal line work as well. So both these guys expect to be on the field a ton, getting great price tags on them. Below that, you have Saquon at 61. Tough matchup against the Titans, but the price tag is really cheap for him. And bringing in a new coach should see them possibly rejuvenate that team a little bit. So I could see Barkley catch more passes from Jones out of the backfield. The fact that he's cheaper than a backup in Madison is pretty funny. So Barkley is definitely one guy to make note of. Same thing can be said for Montgomery, just because the Bears are pretty thin offensively. Montgomery, Donnel Moon, they're going to command a lot of targets. You have Gibson, who's kind of got blessed into getting the start week one after it looked like he was going to be relegated and Brian Robinson was going to start, but unfortunate news with that shooting with Brian Robinson. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks. So Gibson, his time is now to show what he can do. Don't mind him at 58, but I could see McKissick also get some work in the pass catching role. So he's not going to be like a 3-down back, but he should still get probably 15 touches in week one. The cheap running backs in the 5K range will be A.J. Dillon. Probably be slept on a bit, and he should have a good year in terms of pass catching and also getting some carries. And could see maybe the Packers go to a more run-heavy approach, especially if their wide receivers aren't able to really produce, but we'll see. Going further down, we're getting a running back that's going to be starting for the Houston Texans. They released Marlon Mack, so Dameon Pierce, a rookie. He had a great preseason. He's kind of earned this role, and you should see a lot of work first and second down, maybe lose some third down work to Rex Burkhead, but can maybe still catch a couple passes if need be in first and second down situations. Wide receivers, top wide receivers, Adams is your most expensive at 81. I have no problem with any of these guys. They're all great. Given some of these don't have the easiest matchups, at least on paper. But Adams, you compare him with his former teammate, Derek Carr. You compare definitely Justin Jefferson at 78 with by himself, or get him with Kirk Cousins if you wanted to. But there's a lot of wide receivers that I like that are in the 6K range, just a little bit cheaper, do a more balanced maybe approach week one. First guy that sticks out is going to be $6,400 A.J. Brown. He had a huge training camp. The Eagles, their preseason, they didn't play their starters. So they didn't get much work at all in the preseason. They kind of got some training camp, and it's a pretty light approach heading into the season for Nick Sirianni's group. But Brown is going to have a big season, I believe. even if he might not get as many targets as he was back in Tennessee. But we know with Tennessee, they were still a very run-dominant team with Derrick Henry. And Hurts also does like to run the ball, but I almost said Doug Peterson. But Nick Sirianni will like to air it out a little bit. And it's on the road, week 1. The matchup is solid, running and passing, so it could see a balanced approach from the Eagles. The Lions are ranked bottom 10 in their secondary. The Eagles have a pretty high total, so we're getting their number 1 wide receiver who's going to command the most targets on the team, I believe, this year, and a red zone threat in A.J. Brown at a very cheap price tag. So he looks great in that range. You also have Tyreek Hill, even though the matchup isn't easy against the Patriots. Him and Tua are super cheap. You can stack those two guys. Mike Williams looks great in a potential shootout. McLaurin with a new quarterback this year. We'll see how he fares, but his price tag is also super cheap. But I'm starting with A.J. Brown. Marquise Brown also is firmly in the mix against the Chiefs, especially if you're stacking KC a bit. You can use him as a bring back. Brandon Cooks at 63. I prefer Hill over Waddle. And not that thrilled about St. Brown, at least to start, at least in this week, just because there's so many other guys in his range that are going to be in better spots in terms of just having a higher scoring team or higher scoring game. Michael Thomas, if you're pairing Winston with him, that's fine. He was looking great early on, then he had a hamstring injury, but it looks like he's going to start to see how much that has any effect on him, if any. You have Lazard, the number 1 wide receiver for the Packers heading into this season. But it's tough to pass on Michael Pittman. $5,500 gets a new veteran quarterback and a much better quarterback. And Matt Ryan, who knows how to get his receiver the ball and knows how to get his receivers great fantasy points. We saw Julio Jones and Ridley when Matt Ryan was in Atlanta just have great seasons. And Pittman should benefit because besides Pittman, the Colts, and not to mention the matchup is excellent. Houston, the worst secondary, ranked, tied with the Giants. And it's going to be Pittman commanding so many targets from Matt Ryan because they have like Paris Campbell and Doolin as their other guys and wide receivers and like Alec Pierce. But Pittman, this is his chance to really prove it, and I'm super shocked that he's $5,500. Another guy in 5K would be like Donnel Moon, I believe, in that range. He gets a matchup against the 49ers, but they're at home. There's a chance that they're probably going to be trailing in this game. So if you wanted to get to Mooney at this price tag, he's going to command so many targets. They lost Allen Robinson, and they replaced him with Byron Pringle, who did have a good season for the Chiefs, but that was like his, didn't do much before that last season. And I still believe it's going to be Mooney who's going to really take off for the offense. So at 57, given the upside that he gives you for like 12 plus targets, tough to pass on him. Further down would be like Thielen, Robert Woods, Chris Kirk, big contract that he got. We also have a couple guys in the 4K range that look somewhat solid, like Marquez Valdes-Scantling going to be starting alongside Juju Smith-Schuster. We have Hardman, possibly big play, but Scantling can also do that. Further down here, some tournament options will be like Nico Collins, Edwards at 42, but you could probably go with like Drake London over him. For 800 more, you have Treylon Burks. Also, a rookie is going to have a big role for the Titans this year, losing both Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and replacing them with Robert Woods, who's coming off of an ACL, and getting him in the first round in Treylon Burks. Moving over to tight end, like Mark Andrews a lot, he gets a great matchup. He's going to get even more targets this year. Now, the fact that they lost Marquise Brown to Arizona, we saw him have some monster games to close out the second half of the season. So I have no problem with Mark Andrews, but I also have no problem with Travis Kelce at 66. He's a couple hundred less, if that makes any difference to you. But Kelce, not having Hill there, he's going to get so many targets from Patrick Mahomes that I still prefer Kelce, but I don't mind if you wanted to go to Mark Andrews. But those two are probably like my favorites if I'm paying up, obviously. The price gap is not as big as it is on FanDuel. So like you have Kittle less than 1,000 separation. You have Pitts only 900 less. So I'd rather get to Kelce or get to Mark Andrews. If I wanted to go in the 4K range, my favorite is Dallas Goedert. Pair him with Hurts if you wanted to, or play him by himself. But you should also have a big season coming in this year as the number 1 tight end. And then value would be like Austin Hooper. We know Ryan Tannehill does like to throw to tight ends, and the Titans don't have too many options to throw the ball to. It's Hooper, it's going to be Robert Woods, it's going to be Burks, and those guys are going to really command it. Good to see like Nick Westbrook, he kind of get some work as well. But like Hooper's role, his upside this year, and it's kind of it. You got some guys here like Hurst from the Bengals. Now that they lost Uzama to the Jets, but overall, like probably think I pay up would be Kelsey. Mid range would be Goddard. Defense, like to always go cheap at defense. So like the Dolphins against the Pats at home. We have the Commanders against the Jaguars. At least Trevor Lawrence turnover prone. Mac Jones not so much, but the Miami defense is really solid, and we saw them put up lots of 20-point games at the end of last season. If I wanted to go up a little bit, the Eagles at 31 look solid. Go up even further if you wanted to pay up for a defense. Probably look to like the Titans at 35, or obviously if you wanted to pay all the way up, I look to the Colts against the Texans, or possibly even the Ravens against the Jets. But usually I like to pay down, so I'm looking at like the Dolphins, the Commanders. Those teams stick out a bit. So it's kind of it in terms of a first look. If you're doing a balanced approach, this is definitely something. My favorite pay-up running back would probably still be Eckler. Try to get to Eckler or get to Taylor and then McCaffrey. But that's the first 6 guys, at least I'm thinking about my lineup on DraftKings. Let's do the same thing for FanDuel. All right, so for FanDuel, a lot of the picks and the players I mentioned will be the same type of guys that I'm targeting. The pricing is a little bit different on some guys, so I'll make note of that. But at quarterback, like I mentioned, no problem if you wanted to go to any of these top guys. They have Hurts a little bit. He's at 8K, but the price, you have 10K more salary on FanDuel, so it's not too much of a difference. But if I'm looking to pay up, Lamar Jackson, get to the running quarterbacks. Jackson, Murray, Hurts would be my 3 top guys. Lance is a little bit more expensive at 75, so I prefer some of these guys that are a little bit more than him, more of a known than him at this point. Values would be like Matt Ryan against the Texans, Justin Fields with his rushing upside, even though the matchup is tough, and then Jameis Winston should score some points against the Falcons' terrible defense, and we know he loves to take shots downfield, and he does have 3 good wide receivers. Running back, Taylor's over 10K. You have a little bit of savings on McCaffrey, so probably like McCaffrey the most, then Eckler, then Taylor, then Henry. But then you get a second tier, and you even get these guys that are absolute studs like Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon at this range. Najee Harris is 82, so he's kind of priced up to the second tier, unlike he is on DraftKings, where he's like in the third tier. And then we're getting a big discount on Aaron Jones at 74, so I prefer Jones a lot, again, on both sites at this price tag, especially it's cheaper than like Connor and Swift, and still like his upside, and still Packers with Aaron Rodgers there, they're still going to score a lot of points. And then instead of getting to Najee Harris, I like the other side and getting to Joe Mixon for 100 more, just because the Bengals should score more points than the Steelers are projected to win. They're at home. And Mixon will play like a 3-down back. He'll catch passes as well, just similar to Najee Harris. Values, once again, would be Barkley at his cheap $6,800 price tag. You have Montgomery, and then they have Marlon Mack at 59, but then you have Pierce, who's going to be the starter at 54, and Mack has been released. Wide receivers, top end, once again, you have Adams most expensive on both sides. No problem. I probably wouldn't play him by himself. If you're playing Derek Carr, you can play Devontae Adams. Tyreek Hill is expensive at 77. I prefer getting a Jefferson over Hill. Doesn't have to compete with as many guys on that offense. We have A.J. Brown at 71. Pittman is 72. So Pittman is a great value on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's a different story. He's still a playable, but he's cheaper. I mean, you have a lot of guys cheaper like Brown, McLaurin. So sticking to the 6K range, a couple guys would be Mike Williams. Chargers have the second highest total on the slate. Williams, huge red zone threat, just a big play threat. Targets are going to Mike Williams and going to Keenan Allen, and then back out of the backfield they're going to Eckler. So we know Herbert loves to throw, and that offense is very pass heavy as well. Other guys that are very cheap would be like Michael Thomas, especially if you're playing Jameis Winston. He said he's going to start week 1, so he looks good if you wanted to pair him. Or go to Mooney and just hope that wouldn't be shocked, but expect him to continue to get those double-digit targets and possibly big play threats, and hopefully gets into the end zone more. We have Cooks at 66, also solid. He's going to have another big role for the Texans until they get their first round pick back in John Mechie, which that unfortunate diagnosis for him. So in that range, once again, it's going to be Cooks that I like. Cheaper would be Mooney, Thomas, Thielen. Don't even hate him at 61 with everybody going to Jefferson. Other guys would be Kirk at 58. Those are the main ones. Values like Valdez-Scantling for tournaments. Look at Robinson. Robinson is 3K on DraftKings, 47 on FanDuel, so he looks good if you needed him as well. At tight end position, this is a different story. So obviously, if you can get to Andrews or Kelsey, that's fine. But on DraftKings, these guys are like 1,000 more, even less than 1,000 more than the second tier. Not the case on FanDuel. You're getting a huge difference, 2K difference from Pitts to Travis Kelsey. And the Falcons, they are thin in terms of in their receiving core. Pitts should have a big season playing with Marcus Mariota, who loved to get his tight ends involved back when he was starting in Tennessee with Jonnu Smith. And it should happen with Pitts. So at 6K, I think he's going to have a big year, big difference. So I love his value. Obviously, if you're looking to pay up, I still prefer Kelsey and Mark Andrews. Value would be like Dallas Goedert at 57, but I like Pitts for 300 more. And that mid-range value under 5K would be like maybe Hayden Hurst, maybe Austin Hooper at 49. At the flex position, you can get to 3 stud running backs. So you can get to Najee Harris, but I like Dalvin Cook. You know he's going to have a big role. If you're not able to get Justin Jefferson, you can get to Cook. Also going to catch passes out of the backfield. And we're getting 3 guys that are basically 3 down workhorses and are able to fit all of them in, get to some values at wide receiver. And that all looks great to me. So defense-wise would be, once again, sub 4K. The Dolphins look great. The Commanders at 37, they stick out. And that's kind of it for the values all the way down here. You know, not looking at really anybody else. Above 4K would be like the Eagles at 41. We have the Colts at 45. And pretty much it. But yeah, that's pretty much my first look for week 1. Going over some of the guys that really stick out to me. We'll have more videos out throughout the week, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Best of luck. Hit the like button if you guys enjoyed. Appreciate that. Helps this channel out. And I will see you all next time.